Thank you for joining us today. As a Palestinian who is indigenous to one land and a settler in another, I realize that land acknowledgements can serve as a powerful reminder that indigenous peoples are not relics of the past. And for me, a heartbreaking reminder of the trauma shared by indigenous populations across the world. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that today we are on the land that has been long under the care of several indigenous nations. The Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. I also recognize the remarkable resilience and enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. My name is Nadine Nasser of Gaza Starving, the grassroots group coordinating a Canada-wide rotating hunger strike for an arms embargo on Israel. Today, I am joined by many Toronto-based hunger strikers to make a public announcement to Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly and Prime Minister Trudeau. While bombs are being dropped on Gaza and children are dying of starvation, every single day, Canadians will be on hunger strike until our government enforces an arms embargo on Israel. In less than 1 month, 1,123 hunger strikes have been registered with Gaza Starving. Hunger strikes are taking place in every province and one territory. The hunger strikers participating in the collective call for an arms embargo on Israel are diverse in every way, including in age, background, faith, and political affiliation. Today alone, 272 people are hunger striking. They range from members of parliament, including NDP MP Nikki Ashton and Green Party leader Elizabeth May, to high school students in Toronto, members of a theater group, residential school survivors, Palestinians, Jews, retirees, university students, and the list goes on and on and on. What brings us together is our demand to end our country's complicity in genocide. As a mother, I cannot watch children being killed in the thousands and not think of my own children. As a Palestinian, I cannot watch over 2 million Palestinians being intentionally starved and not think that that could be my family. And as a Canadian, I cannot watch my government arm the country perpetrating these crimes and stay silent. Our first speaker today is Dr. Michael Thackeray, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Food, on the right to food.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Nadine. First, I'll just thank everyone for being here today. As Nadine said, I'm the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. That means I'm an independent expert with authority from the Human Rights Council. I'm the eyes, ears, and good conscience for the UN system on all matters regarding hunger, malnutrition, and famine. What I'll do is I'll just provide you the latest update on what's going on in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories more broadly. Every single person in Gaza is hungry right now. A quarter of the population are starving and struggling to find food and drinkable water. Famine is imminent. To put this in perspective in a global way, if you take up all the people of the world facing famine or catastrophic hunger, 80% can be found in Gaza, marking an unparalleled humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip amid Israel's continued bombardment and siege. Nowhere is safe in Gaza. Since the 9th of October, Israel declared and imposed a total siege on Gaza, depriving 2.3 million Palestinians of water, food, fuel, medicine, and medical supplies. More specifically, pregnant women are not receiving adequate nutrition and healthcare, putting their lives at risk. All children under the age of 5, so this is 335,000 children, are at high risk of severe malnutrition, as the risk of famine continues to increase. So because of that lack of nutrition, a whole generation is now in danger of suffering from permanent physical and cognitive impairment, what doctors call stunting. We're about 103 days into this war. Many of us in the UN, experts like myself and people on the ground with long experience, we have not seen an entire civilian population made to go hungry this completely and quickly. The delivery of UN aid is being hindered by Israel. Providing humanitarian assistance across Gaza is almost impossible. Israel has destroyed more than 60% of Palestinian homes in Gaza, directly affecting people's ability to cook food. This mass destruction of dwellings is making the territory uninhabitable. Nearly 85% of Gazans, so this is about 1.9 million people, are internally displaced, including many who have been displaced multiple times, as families are forced to move repeatedly in search of safety. Israel is not only using food as a weapon, it is destroying Gaza's food system. Israel is destroying and blocking access to farmland and the sea. Reports indicate that since the 27th of October, approximately 22% of agricultural land, so things like orchards, greenhouses, and farmland in northern Gaza, have been razed by Israeli forces. I've spoken directly to fishers in Gaza, and I've confirmed this with UN reports. And from those conversations and reports, I can tell you that Israel has destroyed approximately 70% of Gaza's fishing fleet. Even with the little humanitarian aid that has been allowed to enter, people still lack food and fuel to cook. Most bakeries are not operational. Meanwhile, access to safe water continues to diminish, while the healthcare system has collapsed due to the widespread destruction of hospitals, significantly heightening the spread of communicable diseases. And now, of course, we're in the winter months. Concerns about hunger in Gaza are not new. We've witnessed over the past 102 days, what we have witnessed over the past 102, 103 days is against the backdrop of a 17-year Israeli blockade against Gazans. Before this war, because of the Israeli blockade, half of the people in Gaza were food insecure, and more than 80% relied on humanitarian aid. So even before the war started, Gazans were in a precarious situation when it came to food and hunger. There's also increased violence by Israeli settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank, under the watch of Israeli forces. For Palestinians in the West Bank, this has been one of the most violent years. What we're also witnessing is also the food system in the West Bank being destroyed. So things like farmland is being destroyed and trees are being uprooted. So if you take into consideration Israel's mass destruction of the food system in Gaza, the increased violence in the West Bank, the destruction of the food system for Palestinians also in the West Bank, the weaponization of food and the blocking of aid, if you take all of these actions combined with the dehumanizing statements made by Israeli political leaders at all levels, you can see how this is an unfolding genocide. My colleagues, the other independent experts whose mandates include things like health, water, housing, we've raised the alarm about this unfolding genocide several times since the outbreak of the war. We raised the alarm about the risk of genocide, calling for governments to act to prevent this genocide. Our alarm about this unfolding genocide does not only refer to the ongoing bombardment of Gaza. Our main concern is about the slow suffering and death caused by Israel's long-standing occupation, blockade, and the current civic destruction. Genocide is not a singular event. It unfolds as a process. And in this case, the genocide has been a process unfolding for decades. The only way out of this nightmare is for the end of the occupation and an immediate ceasefire. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thackeray. And I'd like to invite Dr. Tariq Labani to speak.
Thank you very much for being here. Thank you so much for hunger striking, for putting your bodies on the line for something that we all deeply believe in. As a doctor, my jobs really are twofold: to diagnose and to treat. And here, the diagnosis is something that we had made very early and unfortunately has panned out to be true. From almost day one, we have been saying that the Israelis are going to destroy Gaza. From almost day one, we have been saying that the hospitals are under threat, that doctors will be killed. And unfortunately, despite being very clear about these warnings, despite being very lucid about the consequences of them, the world has allowed it to happen. It is not good enough for us as a medical system, for me as a doctor, to make diagnoses. Treatments have to be applied. And in a case like this, the treatments were always clear. There has to be justice, there has to be peace, there has to be an end to the active killing and destruction in Gaza. Right now, today, there are Palestinians who are suffering. We don't need to wonder why, and we don't need to ask ourselves how to stop it. We know why: the Israeli attacks, the Israeli occupation writ large, and this unfolding genocide, the process that the doctor had been talking about. And we don't need to ponder the treatments. We know them exactly and in detail. There has to be an immediate, permanent, and durable ceasefire. There has to be justice. There has to be, without any pause, a return of all of the aid that can be provided and an opening of the borders. The Palestinians do not need specifically the world to give them aid. They just need the world to stop everything from going in, to stop the siege, to stop the blockade, to stop the boats from being sunk when they're getting fish, to stop the fields from being plowed when they're growing food. I think we've all seen, all of you certainly have seen the videos that have been circulating showing the absolute carnage in Gaza. I've been watching them with a different eye because the people who are giving these treatments are my colleagues. The people in the hospitals are my friends. They're people who I've spent many a night with, watching innocent people come in injured, listening to the thuds of bombs and the explosions that shook the ground as we tried to treat the patients. One case that is so emblematic is of one of my colleagues, a doctor in Gaza City, with Shifa Hospital that is no longer functioning. And so he was at his kitchen table when he was brought a victim of a recent bombing, who had lost a good chunk of her leg. She was placed on the table, and he knew that the only way that he could save her life was to amputate. We have talked about amputations without anesthesia. We have talked about amputations in hospitals that were unfit. This was an amputation without anesthesia on a kitchen table. A perfectly preventable situation, and we know how to prevent it. At the moment, we talked about some of the treatments. Well, we in Canada, we are not just on the sidelines watching what's happening. We are main characters in the genocide of the Palestinian people. And we are not the protagonists. We are the antagonists. We are, to steal a phrase, the baddies. We are the baddies because we support Israel diplomatically. We give them cover and shield them diplomatically. We are the baddies because we literally arm Israel, give them weapons with which they can kill. We are the baddies because we give protection, cover, and support to soldiers, Canadians, who go against Canadian law and kill Palestinians in Gaza. And so we strike. And so we use our bodies as our voice so that we can ask, beg the Canadian government to stop hurting our brothers, our sisters, our siblings, to stop hurting our humanity, to stop hurting us, to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lubani. And I failed to mention before that Dr. Lubani is an emergency physician here in Canada, but has worked as a physician in Gaza for 10 years. And so knows really exactly what's happening from the stories on the ground from his friends, the remaining friends that have survived. Now I'd like to introduce Rachel Small, who's the Canada organizer of World Beyond War, to tell us a little bit about what our demand is, what are both our plea and our demand for an arms embargo on Israel.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you to my colleagues here who have shared just such powerful and harrowing testimony. As an anti-war organizer with World Beyond War for 3 months, we've been mobilizing as we've been witnessing what's been described here today, as we've been witnessing the Israeli military indiscriminately bombing civilian neighborhoods, infrastructure, killing at the latest count over 24,000 people, almost half of them children. Even as an anti-war organizer, this is an unimaginable catastrophe, and it's being live streamed to our phones in real time. Everyone is seeing what is happening. And although the Canadian government has finally voted in favor of a ceasefire, Canada continues to directly support the Israeli military's attacks on Gaza, notably by transferring weapons to Israel. And this has happened at record levels over the past few years. In fact, according to the Government of Canada's own report from last year on the export of military goods, there were more military export permits last year from Canada to Israel than to any other country. So we are here today because we refuse to stand aside when we know that companies across Canada from coast to coast are involved in arming and are profiting from arming Israel's horrific attack on Gaza. From companies like Apex in New Brunswick or gas stops in Newfoundland on the East Coast, to companies like Lakecor and ASCO Aerospace on the West Coast in BC. There are dozens and dozens of companies across this country who right now are using Canadian infrastructure, are relying on the Canadian military export regime to allow them to ship weapons, often via the US, to Israel at this moment that this country is committing horrific war crimes right before our eyes. Within just a few dozen kilometers from this room are companies like Pratt & Whitney, whose engines power IDF fighter jets and combat drones. Are companies like Ben Machine or Arconic, who make parts for the F-35, the fighter jet that's being used by the Israeli Air Force primarily in its aerial assaults of Gaza right now. Or companies like L3 Harris, whose components are integrated into Israel's air-to-ground bombs, as well as its main warplanes, battle tanks, and warships. I can name one more. There's Incus, just a few kilometers from here, who brags that this is a Canadian company founded in Toronto, who brags that they have supplied the government of Israel with more command and control units than any other supplier in history. This is exactly what my colleague, Dr. Tarek Lubani, was referring to in highlighting that Canada is a main player here and is directly complicit in the violence on the ground. I speak for myself, but I know I speak for thousands of others across this country as well, cannot in good conscience stand by as weapon companies in our neighborhoods, in our backyards, and across this entire country are arming and making a fortune off of the massacre of thousands of Palestinians by selling weapons and military technology to Israel. And the commitment of thousands of people across the country has been extremely clear. that until the Canadian government stops the flow of weapons to Israel, then people of conscience across the country are forced to take whatever actions we can to stop a genocide. This has looked like sit-ins and civil disobedience. This looked like dozens of weapons blockades at arms factories across the country. This has looked like tens of thousands of people marching in the streets of almost every city in Canada nearly every single weekend. And today, this looks like hundreds of people on hunger strike. Without the support of weapons exported from Canada, the US, and Europe, Israel could not carry out this carnage in Gaza. So we are calling on Canada to impose an arms embargo on Israel effective immediately. This means Canada immediately halting all transfers of weapons to Israel. That means canceling existing contracts to sell weapons, including weapons parts, revoking existing export licenses, and not issuing new contracts or export licenses. An arms embargo can be put into place immediately. This is not a radical demand. This is a process very familiar to the Canadian government, which, for instance, previously imposed a two-way arms embargo on Israel in the 1980s as a response to Israeli violence against Palestinians during the First Intifada. And the Canadian government more recently, of course, flipped the switch on exports and brokering permits to Russia very, very quickly following its invasion of Ukraine. They did the same thing with Turkey in 2021, immediately canceling export permits and putting a policy of presumptive denial in place for new ones. The Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly has both the legal authority under Canada's Export and Import Permits Act and a responsibility under the Arms Trade Treaty to deny export permits for arms to Israel on human rights grounds. She can do this today. It's time for Canada to make its call for a ceasefire real by cutting off the flow of weapons to Israel and putting an arms embargo in place right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rachel. We're gonna take gonna have a short Q&A. Sorry, we're gonna show videos from, so we didn't even think to inform MPs about the hunger strike. We didn't even think that that would be a useful thing for us to do. But when a few of them heard that this was going on through their networks, immediately we started getting people contacting us saying, how can we support and how can we join? So we have a video of support from MP in Quebec, NDP MP Alexandre Boulay-Ris. And so the video of support, which we'll be showing shortly, as well as there are two MPs who have consented that we can use their name today, and they are on hunger strike today. And one of them has recorded a video. So the MPs that are on hunger strike today are Green Party leader Elizabeth May and NDP MP Nikki Ashton. I'm going to ask Zaid to pull up the videos from Alexandre Boulay-Ris and NDP MP Nikki Ashton. Thank you.
Bonjour tout le monde, Alexandre Boulay-Ris, député de Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie et chef adjoint du NPD. Évidemment, ce n'est pas à vous que je dois expliquer les atrocités qui se passent à Gaza depuis maintenant 4 mois, les massacres de masse, la crise humanitaire qui est extrêmement intense et très dangereuse. 24 000 Palestiniens, dont des milliers d'enfants qui ont été tués sous les bombes de l'armée israélienne. Aujourd'hui, il faut continuer à demander un cessez-le-feu, mais c'est plus suffisant. Il faut aller plus loin, il faut s'assurer que nos gouvernements ne sont pas complices des massacres qui sont perpétués là-bas. Alors, c'est pourquoi nous, au NPD, ça fait plusieurs semaines qu'on demande un embargo sur la vente d'armes à Israël au gouvernement de Benjamin Netanyahou. C'est important de cesser de vendre des armes, mais aussi des composantes d'armes. Et le Canada doit également jouer un rôle pour limiter ou supprimer la circulation d'armes illégales dans la région qui font une escalade de la violence dans ce conflit-là. Alors, c'est pourquoi, aujourd'hui, on exprime notre solidarité avec le mouvement que vous lancez. On est de tout cœur avec vous. Il faut continuer à mettre de la pression, il faut augmenter la pression, parler des Palestiniens, parler du droit des Palestiniens à vivre dans un État en paix et en sécurité. Alors, bravo pour cette initiative. On est avec vous. Bonjour tout le monde, Alexandre Boulris, député de...
My name is Nikki Ashton. I'm the Member of Parliament for Churchill, Keewatin-Niskayee. Over 24,000 people killed, 60,000 people injured. More than 80% of Gaza's population has been displaced. The real threat of disease and famine. People are dying, people have been slaughtered. Survivors are living in constant fear. This is the reality of Gaza, a humanitarian crisis, a new Nakba, a genocide. It didn't just happen. This is the result of decades of ignoring the rights of Palestinians, of a constant occupation and the oppression of Palestinian people, including denying their right to exist. It is the result of Israel with a far-right government that has been given a blank check from countries like Canada. Canada that's given Israel political cover by refusing to call for a ceasefire for months. And Canada that continues to provide military support to Israel. Arms that are being used to fuel the conflict, arms that are being used to kill Palestinians. The sad reality is that Canada used to be a leader when it came to peacekeeping around the world, including in the Middle East. And now we've become a leader when it comes to the arms trade. We must act, and we must act now. It starts with showing solidarity with the people of Gaza by joining the mass hunger strike for Gaza. I will be joining the mass hunger strike for Gaza, and I know many people across Canada will be doing the same to show solidarity with the people living this reality every day. But we are also calling for action. An arms embargo on Israel. Canada must stop exporting arms to Israel now. We must continue to push for a permanent ceasefire and for humanitarian response given the humanitarian crisis on the ground now. But we must continue with a call for peace and justice. Peace and justice means an end to the occupation of Palestinians, an end to the oppression of Palestinians, and the establishment of a Palestinian state as part of a two-state solution. My name is Nikki Ashton. I'm the
Thank you very much to our speakers today. Thank you to our hunger strikers. Some of you are in the room. I'm seeing faces that I know have done videos before for us on at Gaza Starving on Instagram. I am seeing people online watching that are hunger striking at home. I am getting updates on my phone from the growing movement. There are more MPs that have joined and their names will be released after I get the consent to do so. There are also, in the last 24 hours, 210 new hunger strikers have joined our movement. Today alone, 272 people are on hunger strike. There are 4 people who are hunger striking for 1 month. There is 1 person who is hunger striking for 32 days. In total, this accounts to 1,123 hunger strikes that have been registered with us as of, I think it was about 7:45 this morning. I'm ready to take questions now. I think that we still have Dr. Michael Thackeray on Zoom and Dr. Lubani and Rachel. So go ahead.
I want to clarify, are the majority of people who have registered doing sort of one-day strikes, one at a time here and there? Or
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's a huge range. So I would say most are doing multiple days, but the multiple days are often once a week or twice a week. And as I mentioned, there are several that are 5 in a row, 3 days in a row. So 5 are 1 month or over. And some people have joined for 1 day and often come back to register. But yes, some people have joined for 1 day. Any further questions? All right, well, thank you very much for joining us. Now the hunger strikers will be joining Gaza Starving. We're going to be walking over to, oh. Did I see, I was told there's a question? Yes, please.
I'm not sure if it's directly related, I mean, it is, and it isn't. A few of us are putting together a fundraiser. We were in contact with a group of activists in Cairo who are fundraising for medical students who are currently studying in Cairo, are close to graduating, and who are stranded without family or financial support. And they're organizing for people to pay the tuition of these students. And there are two of us who are organizing this event coming up soon. But I wanted to ask Tarek specifically if he felt that that was, I've been trying to get hold of you, Tarek, to ask you that question. This was an initiative that we should be giving priority to in the absence of anything that we can really do immediately, whether, supporting future doctors for Gaza.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I think the root of the question is, what do we do to help rebuild the medical system, which has been so thoroughly and completely destroyed? That's really going to involve three big phases. The first phase, and again, I'm going to draw on my experience working as an emergency doctor. Somebody comes in, they're bleeding to death. You don't discuss their college education. You discuss how to stop that bleed immediately. So we have to immediately sort of reverse the trends that are happening. That is to say, provide supplies within Gaza, make sure that the water, food, and electricity are turned on immediately, and as much as possible, put as many people as possible in a way that they can help: surgeons, emergency doctors, people who can help with sanitation, what are called wash workers, etc. So that's phase one. The second phase is going to be the intermediate phase, and that's going to be erecting temporary hospitals, what are called field hospitals in most places, so that we can relatively quickly get a semi-functioning medical system up and running. And as part of the long-term planning, that's where your idea about education comes in. Of course, there are lots of projects to educate doctors. They're all important. Yes, Gaza is going to need a lot of doctors. There have been already over, I think at this point, 400 healthcare workers who've been killed, involving at least about 100 doctors who've been killed. And the psychological trauma will mean that many of them can never practice again after this war. We're going to lose a lot of doctors as a result of this war, just like we're losing a lot of everything. So I think there are those three stages, and funding the education of doctors is part of that third stage. We have to think long-term and keep working towards it. So thank you for the initiative. We can talk about it a little bit more after.
Thank you, Dr. Labani. So I was told not to improvise an ad lib because I'm really emotional and I'm really tired, but I just think it's really important to say that none of us want to be hunger striking. There's nobody in this room, there's nobody from the 1,134, whatever number, 1,123 hunger strikes. None of these people want a hunger strike. I work full time. I have 2 young children. I am exhausted. I am grieving. And yet we have to do something. This is a situation, this is unprecedented. And what made us, the organizers, what made us do this is thinking, how do we act with such an unprecedented situation? Nobody has ever, in our lifetimes, all of us here in the room, all of us that are watching, none of us have ever seen anything to this scale ever before. We have never witnessed such cruelty. We have never seen such atrocities. We cannot go one day without seeing body parts of children all over our social media. I wake up every morning to see who else has died. How many more hundreds have died while I was sleeping? So I just kind of want to take a moment to say, we're not doing this because this is fun for us. We're not doing this because we want to be doing it. We're exhausted. We are all fighting so hard, and the tide has turned, and the Canadian government hasn't realized it yet. The public opinion has changed. We here in this room, we here across Canada, we are your voters. We vote for you. You are our representatives. You are supposed to be responsive to us. And we have to hunger strike just to get you to listen to us. How many more MP offices do we have to go to? How many more letters do we have to write? How many more petitions do we have to sign? What can we do? We are begging. We are demanding change. All we are asking for is peace. Why isn't our government listening? Why do we have to go on hunger strike in the thousands to make our government listen to us? All we want is peace. We want an end to the killing. We want an end to the intentional starvation of an entire population. This needs to stop, and we are willing to do absolutely everything in our power, including putting our bodies on the line to make it stop, to make our government listen to us. We deserve better. We are complicit in a genocide, and I say no more, and we all say no more, and the numbers are growing rapidly. This is a national movement, and we aren't going anywhere. So, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Jolie, we are not going anywhere. We will continue the hunger strike, and we are demanding an arms embargo until you do, and you are choosing not to. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Jolie is choosing not to. She is choosing to prioritize some lives over other lives. We have seen this happen time and time and time again. We are tired of this. We say no more. No more. And thank you. We are now going to Minister Freeland's office to deliver a letter, including our demand. So thank you very much to the hunger strikers who came here with, I sent you the email with the address quite late last night. So thank you to those of you who have come. And you're welcome to join us as we go to Minister Freeland's office now to deliver this letter. Thank you.
There's things for us that is find the letter that we're going to be delivering, sending copies to Prime Minister Melanie Jolie and Mary.